Does it hurt yet?
When you hear the Green Mile, you'd probably picture John Coffey healing Paul of his urinary infection, or healing Melinda Moore of her brain tumor, or saying his last words before being electrocuted. But what if I told you that what you saw was just half of the story? A great deal happened behind the scenes that unfortunately couldn't make it to our screens. For years, fans cried, gasped, and stood in awe of John's heartbreaking yet jaw-dropping miracle. But today, the cast has finally decided to grant viewers the rare and golden opportunity to see what actually happened behind the curtains. From secret on-set tensions to more profound emotional moments that were never scripted, I can tell you for free that a lot was actually going on behind the scenes. So sit back, grab your favorite snack, and remain glued to your screens, because what you're about to watch will definitely sweep you off your feet. The film almost didn't take place. For a minute or two, can you imagine a world where the Green Mile never existed? Hard to imagine, am I right? But the movie almost didn't happen. Following the success of The Shawshank Redemption, director Frank Darabont sought to adapt another Stephen King story. Yet studios weren't convinced. Who, they asked, would want to watch a 3-hour prison drama filled with sadness, miracles, and death row despair? Would audiences truly sit through a story that mixed the supernatural with human suffering? And many other questions. According to reports, this project was rejected for several months. While some executives complained that the film was too long, others said it was too depressing and that viewers would not connect deeply with it. Sadly, the dream of bringing the Green Mile to life seemed to fade, but fortunately, Warner Brothers came to its rescue. And after much deliberation, the Green Mile was produced. Thank goodness Warner Brothers saw what other executives couldn't see. The film was based on Stephen King's 1996 novel. What if one of the most powerful films ever made began not as a single book, but as a series of short ones released month after month? Now that is precisely how The Green Mile was born. In 1996, legendary author Stephen King did something bold and unexpected. Instead of releasing one big novel, he decided to publish The Green Mile as a 6-part serial story, each small book ending on a painful cliffhanger that left readers desperate for more. Why did he do it? According to King, he wanted people to feel the same tension inmates felt on death row, waiting for something inevitable, yet uncertain. It was a brilliant idea that kept readers emotionally tied to every turn of the story. The story follows Paul Edgecombe, a prison guard during the Great Depression, and John Coffey, a towering inmate with a mysterious gift. King poured raw emotion, faith, and moral conflict into every page. But could such a profoundly spiritual and heartbreaking story translate effectively to the screen? Frank Darabont believed it could. After adapting The Shawshank Redemption, he saw something almost divine in The Green Mile and decided to bring it to life. Fans might wonder, did the movie stay true to the book? Amazingly, it did. Darabont followed King's words almost line for line, keeping the tone, characters, and even the most minor details intact. Stephen King himself visited the set and praised the adaptation, calling it one of the most faithful representations of his work. Turning a 6-part novel into a 3-hour film was no easy feat. Every emotion had to be preserved, every message protected. Could the pain of Coffey's innocence and the miracle of his gift survive the move from page to screen? When the final cut was made, audiences wept, critics raved, and King's masterpiece found new life on film. If you watched the movie, did you know that everything you saw on screen was based on somebody's novel? Guess not. The truth behind the name John Coffey.
I'm sorry for what I am.
Names in Stephen King's stories are never random, and John Coffey's name carries more meaning than most fans realize. It sounds straightforward at first, however, a rich layer of symbolism and faith lies hidden beneath that apparent simplicity. The name John Coffey was purposefully chosen to reflect theological and emotional depth, as Stephen King reportedly disclosed. It was a message concealed in plain sight, not just a name. Consider it. Like Jesus Christ, John Coffey's initials are JC. From the moment he appeared in The Green Mile, Coffey embodied traits that seemed uncommon and almost divine. He healed the sick, performed miracles, absorbed the pain of others, and ultimately sacrificed himself for crimes he did not commit. Was this a coincidence? Not at all. King created Coffey as a Christ-like figure trapped in a world of sin and injustice, a man misunderstood and condemned because of the goodness that frightened others. The surname Coffey adds another layer of meaning. It sounds eerily like coffin, a word tied to death and finality. This subtle play on sound symbolizes his destiny. John Coffey's story was always meant to end in tragedy. Yet through his death came redemption and revelation. He becomes a symbol of light in a dark world, just as a coffin marks both the end of life and the beginning of remembrance. Even his first name, John, has biblical roots. In the Bible, John is the name of both a prophet and a disciple who spread the message of truth and compassion. In the film, John Coffey does the same. He speaks little, listens deeply, and touches lives without judgment. His silence holds power, his tears carry grace, and his final words echo with forgiveness. Stephen King wanted audiences to see beyond the prison walls. He wanted them to question what actual innocence looks like and to recognize that miracles often come from unexpected places. When Paul Edgecombe witnessed Coffey's power, he didn't just see an inmate, he saw a reflection of something greater. The name John Coffey was not chosen by accident. It was the perfect name for a man who bore the weight of others' pain, lived with purity, and died with divine purpose. Doug Hutchison was 39 years old. Can you imagine a man nearly 40 playing a sadistic teenager in one of the most haunting films of the 90s? That was Doug Hutchison when he stepped into the role of Percy Wetmore in The Green Mile. At 39, he portrayed a character written to be young enough to seem immature and spoiled, yet terrifyingly cruel. The contrast between Hutchison's real age and the boyish yet malicious energy he brought to Percy made the character even more unsettling and memorable. Percy Wetmore is a character audiences love to hate. He is bratty, arrogant, and dangerously vindictive, wielding his limited authority over death row with a twisted sense of pleasure. Hutchison's portrayal captured every nuance of the character's cruelty. How could someone so advanced in age convincingly play someone so immature, vindictive, and unpredictable? Hutchison's physical appearance, slim physique, and ability to harness a tense, anxious energy made it all feasible. He perfected Percy's sneering accent, mocking laughter, and unsettling unpredictability, producing a villain who remained in viewers' minds long after the film had ended. Hutchison had to strike a balance between Percy's energy and the level of professionalism required on set. Playing such a nasty character for months took its toll, but his dedication never faltered. Directors and co-stars noted that Hutchison's ability to channel rage and arrogance without becoming caricatured was a rare talent. His age, rather than being a limitation, gave him the control and depth needed to sustain Percy's menace throughout the film. What makes this fact even more dramatic is how Hutchison's age mirrors Percy's disturbing maturity and cruelty. Percy Wetmore was small in stature but enormous in deeds because of his lack of empathy, delight in others' suffering, and sense of entitlement, which made him a psychological terror. The result is a character that remains unforgettable in cinematic history. Doug Hutchison at 39 proved that age is no barrier when it comes to embodying pure menace. His performance transformed Percy Wetmore into one of the most chilling villains in modern film, prompting audiences to question how innocence and cruelty can coexist within a single soul. Frank Darabont directed and wrote the screenplay. Few directors could have turned Stephen King's emotionally powerful serial into a cinematic classic, but Frank Darabont has that uncommon gift. Darabont, best known for his adaptation of The Shawshank Redemption, approached The Green Mile with both love for the source material and a bold vision for the big screen. He did not just direct the film, he meticulously wrote the screenplay, choosing to remain faithful to King's novel while making cinematic choices that heightened suspense, emotion, and moral weight. Darabont's process was intense and precise. He insisted on filming in chronological order to help actors experience the story's emotional progression naturally. This decision allowed Tom Hanks, Michael Clarke Duncan, and the rest of the cast to feel each heartbreak, each miracle, and each moment of tension as it unfolded. Darabont wanted audiences to live inside Cold Mountain Penitentiary with the guards and prisoners, to feel the weight of every step on the Green Mile itself. On set, his attention to detail created stress but also generated remarkable performances. One famous instance involves Michael Clarke Duncan during the scene in which John Coffey treats Paul Edgecombe's infection. Duncan got so invested in the role that he refused to leave character, even between takes, insisting that the weight of Coffey's emotions and moral obligation be felt in every movement. Darabont, famed for both patience and precision, welcomed this zeal. He reportedly stated that if the actor's heart were not entirely in the scene, the audience would sense it. That amount of commitment shaped the filmmaking process. Darabont also faced the enormous challenge of translating Coffey's supernatural powers without making them feel exaggerated or artificial. Every effect, every subtle gesture, and every facial expression had to convey something extraordinary yet believable. He guided the cinematography, lighting, and camera angles with meticulous care, making the prison corridor feel oppressive, the moments of healing feel miraculous, and the executions feel heartbreakingly honest. Darabont's dual role as author and director results in a physically stunning, ethically relevant, and emotionally raw film. His dedication ensured that The Green Mile reached cinematic brilliance while remaining loyal to Stephen King's vision. Decades after its debut, viewers are still frightened by the story that Darabont crafted behind every tear, scream, and gasp of terror in the theater. Now that's the proper way to direct a movie, don't you agree? Tom Hanks was the first and only choice for the role of Paul Edgecombe. When Frank Darabont envisioned The Green Mile, he envisioned only Tom Hanks in the role of Paul Edgecombe. From the very beginning, Hanks was the actor who could carry the film's emotional weight, balancing authority, empathy, and moral struggle on death row. Darabont wrote the part specifically for him, knowing that Hanks' ability to portray sincerity, vulnerability, and strength would make the audience believe in every heartbreak, every miracle, and every moment of tension. Hanks' casting was almost instantaneous. There were no long auditions or screen tests because Darabont knew that the film's heart depended on Hanks's presence. Could any other actor capture Paul Edgecombe's compassion for his inmates, his quiet anguish over the executions, and his wonder at John Coffey's miraculous abilities? The answer seemed obvious. Hanks's proven range in both drama and subtle emotional storytelling made him the perfect choice to guide the audience through the moral and spiritual journey of the story. On set, Hanks immersed himself entirely in the role. He studied prison records from the 1930s to understand the language, routines, and challenges of guards at the time. His dedication extended beyond research. He formed close bonds with his co-stars, especially Michael Clarke Duncan, to create a genuine and heartfelt relationship between Edgecombe and Coffey. Hanks's commitment brought authenticity to scenes that might have otherwise felt artificial, including the emotional death row sequences and the moments of quiet reflection that give the film its soul. The decision to cast Hanks paid off in every scene. His performance anchors the story, providing a moral compass for the audience while allowing the miracle of John Coffey to take center stage. From start to finish, Paul Edgecombe was not just a character. He was the lens through which viewers experienced the wonder, horror, and heartbreak of The Green Mile. And that vision was only possible because Tom Hanks was the first and only choice. Michael Clarke Duncan was relatively unknown. Can you imagine a man who would become the heart of one of the most unforgettable films of the 90s starting as a relatively unknown actor? That was Michael Clarke Duncan when he was cast as John Coffey in The Green Mile. Before this role, Duncan had appeared in small parts in films and television shows, but he had not yet become a household name. His towering stature and deep voice made him noticeable, but few could have predicted the emotional impact he would bring to the screen. Bruce Willis, who had worked with Duncan on Armageddon, recommended him to director Frank Darabont. Darabont was initially unsure, but after Duncan's audition, it became clear that he was perfect for the role. Uniquely, Duncan brought a gentle, almost childlike innocence to Coffey that contrasted sharply with his massive physical presence. Could a man that large convincingly evoke vulnerability, kindness, and profound sadness? Duncan did, delivering a performance that earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. On set, Duncan's dedication was extraordinary. He spent hours rehearsing his scenes, perfecting Coffey's mannerisms, and developing a quiet, empathetic presence that would make the audience believe in the character's miraculous abilities. His ability to cry on cue and convey deep sorrow without words stunned co-stars and crew members alike. Bruce Willis recommended Michael Clarke. Sometimes destiny hides in unexpected friendships, and that was the case with Michael Clarke Duncan and Bruce Willis. Before The Green Mile, Duncan was a struggling actor, taking on minor roles and working as a bodyguard to support himself financially. During that time, he landed a part in the 1998 blockbuster Armageddon, where he met Bruce Willis. The two quickly developed a strong friendship built on respect and mutual admiration. Willis saw something in Duncan that went beyond his towering frame. He noticed a quiet strength, warmth, and emotional depth that few others had taken the time to see. When casting for The Green Mile began, Frank Darabont was searching desperately for someone to play John Coffey, a role that required both physical power and a deeply spiritual presence. Willis, knowing Duncan's range and humility, personally recommended him for the part. He even called Darabont directly, urging him to give Duncan an audition. Willis believed Duncan could deliver something special, something unforgettable. When Duncan finally auditioned, everything changed. His reading was raw, emotional, and hauntingly sincere. He did not act like John Coffey, he became him. Everyone in the room felt the power of his performance, and Darabont knew instantly that the search was over. Bruce Willis's recommendation did more than launch Duncan's career. It revealed one of cinema's most unforgettable talents. Without that crucial push, The Green Mile might never have found its heart, and audiences might never have witnessed the gentle miracle that was Michael Clarke Duncan as John Coffey. The movie was filmed primarily in Tennessee. It might surprise you to learn that The Green Mile, though set in Louisiana, was actually filmed primarily in Tennessee. The crew carefully chose this location because it provided the perfect southern atmosphere needed to bring the haunting prison story to life. Most of the film's iconic scenes took place inside a specially constructed set at a converted warehouse in Tennessee, where the infamous E-Block of Cold Mountain Penitentiary stood tall in all its glory. The production crew ensured the setting felt as authentic as possible by paying close attention to every detail. The heavy atmosphere of the South in the early 1930s was captured by the humid air, buzzing insects, and natural light coming through barred windows. In stark contrast to the depravity within the prison gates, even the neighboring Tennessee landscapes offered serene and spiritual beauty. Many who visited the set described it as both mesmerizing and unsettling, a space that seemed to hold the emotional weight of every scene filmed there. Tennessee's natural charm provided the perfect canvas for Frank Darabont's storytelling vision, turning The Green Mile into not just a movie, but a living, breathing world of pain, redemption, and the supernatural. The death row block was constructed as a single, complete unit. Imagine walking into a room so realistic it could make you forget it was only a movie set. That was the chilling effect of the death row block built for The Green Mile. Known as E-Block, this haunting corridor of sorrow and silence was not a collection of separate scenes stitched together. It was a single, seamless narrative. It was constructed as one complete set from the ground up. Every cell, every flickering light, and every echoing footstep were connected in a single, continuous, and immersive space. It was so lifelike that even the cast and crew often felt like they were stepping into an actual prison. Production designer Terrence Marsh and director Frank Darabont wanted the block to feel real, not staged. They knew that the story's emotional power rested on the authenticity of its surroundings. Instead of building different rooms on separate stages, the entire E-Block was constructed as a single structure within a warehouse in Tennessee. It was built to scale, with functioning doors, working light fixtures, and cell bars that rattled with the weight of time. The corridor stretched long enough to allow the camera to follow the guards as they walked prisoners down what the crew grimly referred to as the Green Mile. The walls were painted a dull, oppressive green, chosen deliberately to reflect the film's tone of fading hope and impending death. The lighting team designed a system that mimicked the flicker of old prison lamps, giving the set an eerie, almost spiritual glow. Even the smell was designed to unsettle. In an effort to achieve this, the crew dampened the floors before filming to create a lingering sense of decay, which blended with the metallic scent of the bars and the faint hum of the lights. Actors described the experience as unnervingly immersive. When Michael Clarke Duncan stepped onto the set as John Coffey, many said his gentle yet powerful presence seemed to calm the air, making even the harshest scenes strangely emotional. For the cast, the set became more than a workplace. In an unexpected twist, it became a world. Tom Hanks once said that when the heavy cell doors closed behind him, he could feel the weight of history and despair pressing in. Thankfully, he and his co-stars were able to portray the profound emotional truths of their characters thanks to the realistic design. Everything happened in real time in that lonely, cramped hallway. There were no camera techniques or fast cuts to conceal. By assembling the entire death row block as a single set, the filmmakers achieved something remarkable. Every action and emotion on screen was inspired by the living, breathing universe they built, not just a backdrop. It was a place where people could practically feel the chill of the Green Mile beneath their feet. Hope shone dimly among grief, and time appeared to stop still. The film's setting took place during the Great Depression. The Green Mile transports viewers to a time when America was struggling to emerge from the shadow of despair, the Great Depression. The story unfolds in 1935, a year marked by poverty, hunger, and the silent suffering of millions. It was a time when people clung to faith and hope because little else was left. But why did Frank Darabont choose this particular period? What made the Great Depression the perfect backdrop for such a powerful story? The answer lies in the emotional weight of that era, where hardship made every act of kindness feel sacred. Setting the film during this time was no coincidence. It added layers of meaning to every scene, making the pain and humanity within the prison walls mirror what was happening outside them. Director Frank Darabont wanted viewers not just to see, but also to feel the tension of a world that had lost its balance. Every element, including the wooden furniture and the guards' uniforms, was meant to represent the 1930s economic hardships. The pessimism of the era was reflected in the subdued colors, dismal lighting, and leisurely pace of life in E-Block. Did the outside world feel any freer than the prison environment? Perhaps not. The Great Depression significantly impacted the motivations of the protagonists. During a period when jobs were scarce, many of the death row guards' responsibilities served as a lifeline. They held onto their duties not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Poverty outside those prison walls forced them to guard men condemned to die, thereby creating an emotional contrast that still resonates with audiences today. This historical backdrop intensified the film's atmosphere of moral struggle and human fragility. It was not just a story about crime and punishment, but about survival, compassion, and redemption in a world that had forgotten both wealth and mercy. How would you act in such a time of desperation? Would you choose cruelty or kindness? That is the haunting question the Green Mile leaves behind. The mouse, Mr. Jingles, was played by 15 different mice.
Oh, there you go.
Did you ever notice how Mr. Jingles seemed to move differently in some scenes, or how his fur appeared a shade lighter or darker depending on the moment? You were not imagining it. The famous mouse from the Green Mile who won hearts with his intelligence and charm was not just one mouse at all. 15 different mice actually played him. Each one was carefully trained to perform a specific action, whether it was rolling the spool, sitting quietly in Delacroix's hands, or scurrying across the floor in perfect timing with the camera. Training mice for film is not an easy task. They are tiny, fast, and unpredictable. Yet the animal trainers on set turned these little creatures into miniature stars. Each mouse had its own personality and talent. One was the best at staying still for close-ups, another excelled at running through small props, and a few were chosen simply because their fur looked great under the lights. But could the audience really tell the difference? Not at all. Through seamless editing and perfect direction, Frank Darabont made 15 mice appear as one living, breathing character who carried the emotional heart of the story. Mr. Jingles was more than a mouse. He was a symbol of innocence, hope, and the small miracles that lived even within the dark walls of death row. When Delacroix trained him, it showed how something pure could exist in a place filled with pain and final goodbyes. And when John Coffey held Mr. Jingles, the mouse became almost sacred, a quiet witness to moments of grace amid despair. Keeping the mice calm and safe behind the scenes required a separate operation. Trainers used tiny props, temperature control, and endless patience to ensure that each mouse was comfortable while filming. The care and effort put into those scenes paid off, resulting in one of the most memorable animal performances in cinema history. So next time you watch The Green Mile and see Mr. Jingles roll that spool or look up with those bright little eyes, ask yourself, which of the 15 do you think you're seeing? Perhaps it does not matter. Together they became one symbol of magic and life in a world surrounded by death. Not your regular kind of prison. Cold Mountain Penitentiary was not your typical prison. Strangely, something felt off from the moment the camera moved through E Block. The air itself smelled of a mixture of fear and faith. The walls seemed to breathe secrets, and the silence was heavier. This was not just a place of punishment. It was a place where the boundaries between life and the supernatural blurred. Viewers could almost sense it, the quiet energy that hinted something extraordinary was about to happen. Unlike the chaotic, violent prisons often depicted in Hollywood films, Cold Mountain had a hint of calmness. The guards, led by Paul Edgecombe, were not hardened villains, but men trying to hold on to their humanity in a job that constantly tested it. The environment was made even more uncomfortable by the peculiar combination of professionalism and sympathy with which they treated the prisoners. Did they behave out of guilt or out of mercy? Did they regard themselves as defenders or as passive observers of a harsh system from which they were unable to flee? Every area of the institution had a unique tale to tell. The austere, clean electric chair room served as a continual reminder that death was inevitable. The lengthy green hallway, which the guards chillingly dubbed the Mile, became a route of judgment as it shone in the dim light. A man's journey across that floor brought him one step closer to eternity. However, miracles took place in that same area. The presence of John Coffey transformed a site of execution into a platform for divine mystery and redemption. Frank Darabont designed the prison not as a backdrop but as a living entity. The lighting was purposefully designed to create a sense of spiritual contrast, with darkness seeping in between periods of brilliance. Even the simplest sounds, such as echoing footsteps and the hum of the electric chair, added to the creepy atmosphere. Cold Mountain was never designed to be a typical prison, just as The Green Mile was never meant to be an average novel. It was a world where justice and faith intertwined, death and compassion met, and miracles occurred in the most unexpected places. In that narrow corridor of sorrow, humanity found its most accurate test, proving that even in the darkest places, something holy could still live. The mystery behind John Coffey's healing. The mystery behind John Coffey's healing in The Green Mile remains one of the most powerful and debated elements in the film. Was he an angel, a vessel of divine power, or simply a man with a supernatural gift he never understood? The truth lies somewhere between faith and tragedy. John Coffey, portrayed by the unforgettable Michael Clarke Duncan, possessed an unexplainable ability to absorb pain, illness, and even death itself from others and release it in a burst of glowing energy. But where did this power come from, and what did it truly mean? Director Frank Darabont and author Stephen King crafted Coffey's healing as a symbol rather than a miracle to be dissected. It was never about science or logic. It was about the moral and spiritual weight of compassion. Coffey's name itself mirrored his nature. The initials JC were not accidental because they paralleled those of Jesus Christ, hinting at his Christ-like purity and suffering. He healed others selflessly, carried the pain of the world inside him, and was condemned by the very people he tried to save. Could it be that his gift was both a blessing and a curse? Every scene of healing carried a sense of awe and dread. When Coffey cured Paul Edgecombe's infection, he breathed life into a man who had almost given up hope. And when he healed Melinda Moores, the warden's dying wife, it was a moment of pure grace, something so divine it brought even the toughest men to tears. Yet each act took a visible toll on him. The darkness he absorbed left him trembling and broken, as though the evil of others was too heavy for one man to bear. What does it say about the world when kindness becomes a burden? Behind the scenes, Frank Darabont made strategic decisions to make these events feel authentic rather than staged. The glowing particles that escaped Coffey's mouth were inserted digitally, although they were kept modest, like air or light, rather than a magical explosion. He wanted the audience to believe that what they were seeing was not imagination, but rather something heavenly that could almost exist in our world. Even the sound design, with its quiet inhaling and exhaling, was created to reflect the rhythm of prayer. Coffey's powers illustrated the healing potential of empathy. He healed out of pure love, not because of someone's deservingness. His gift was one of surrender rather than control. Additionally, by sacrificing so much of himself, he mirrored the central theme of the movie, which is that goodness frequently goes unappreciated and miracles often take on shapes that the world is too blind to notice. Ultimately, John Coffey's recovery involved more than merely curing illness. It was about exposing the cruelty and injustice that ruin innocence, which is humanity's worst sickness. Because of his influence, everyone in his immediate vicinity and onlookers were compelled to consider the actual meaning of justice and compassion. Was he a man touched by God, or was he God's reminder that even in a cruel world, mercy still lives? Maybe he was both. What fans never knew about the urine infection. One of the most emotionally gripping moments in The Green Mile is when Paul Edgecombe, played by Tom Hanks, suffers from a painful urinary tract infection. On screen, it is a moment of vulnerability and human suffering, but behind the scenes, there is a story fans rarely hear about. The depiction of Paul's illness was not just a prop or a minor detail. It was treated with extreme realism in both performance and production choices. Frank Darabont insisted that every gesture, every wince, and every moment of discomfort reflect the actual agony of the condition. But what exactly went into making this scene feel so real? To convey the severity of the infection, the production team studied medical sources and consulted professionals to understand the physical strain it causes. Tom Hanks took the role seriously, rehearsing movements that mimicked the stiffness, urgency, and pain of someone unable to relieve themselves comfortably. He had to maintain the balance between expressing physical suffering and preserving Paul Edgecombe's dignity. The performance required immense skill, as the audience needed to feel Paul's discomfort without it becoming exaggerated or theatrical. Yet the drama extended beyond acting. On the day the infection scenes were shot, the set became almost unbearable to work on. Hanks and Michael Clarke Duncan were filming a sequence where Paul had to walk and run urgently down the corridor while still interacting with Coffey. The Tennessee heat, combined with the weight of heavy period costumes and the glare of artificial lighting, intensified the strain. Later on, Hanks said that he was physically uncomfortable. His restricted and laborious motions only served to heighten the scene's realism. Crew members remember that even Michael Clarke Duncan had to maintain a high level of concentration to respond to Hanks's taut performance in a way that was consistent with his character. A unique sense of reality was produced on set by the tension, and this atmosphere carried over to the screen. Fans might never understand that the purpose of this was to show the human cost of the setting in which the guards worked, not just to create drama. Paul's urinary infection is more than just a health problem. It represents the vulnerability and mortality of a man who, despite his strength and moral authority, is still subject to the frailty of the human body. In a way, it mirrors the suffering of the inmates themselves, making the audience feel the shared humanity of everyone on the Green Mile. The scenario was transformed from a minor story detail to a moment of unvarnished, understandable human experience thanks to Frank Darabont's insistence on realism. Consequently, viewers were able to understand the full gravity of Paul's situation because of Hanks's portrayal of anguish, urgency, and discomfort, as well as the stifling environment of the set. Although the urinary infection might not appear significant to casual viewers, it actually represents the mental and physical struggles that characterize the Green Mile. It was a small detail with immense power. It reminded audiences that even the strongest people are not immune to suffering, and that empathy can be found in the smallest moments of pain. The sequence is unforgettable because it captures both human fragility and the resilience required to endure. Real tears on cue.
Well, on two.
Imagine your strict father crying for something that isn't so serious. Would you laugh or would you cry along? Let's be realistic here. You definitely cry along because you obviously grew up viewing him as an unshakable father figure. Now that was precisely how viewers felt when they saw Michael Clarke Duncan crying on the set of The Green Mile. What few fans realize is that Duncan was required to cry on cue, a feat that sounds simple but was one of the most emotionally demanding challenges of his career. Could someone so physically imposing convincingly express fragility, grief, and empathy without shattering the character's quiet strength? Duncan did, but achieving it was no easy task. Honestly, shedding tears on command is one of the most complex skills for any actor, but Duncan had to make it feel completely authentic, unforced, and raw. Some scenes required him to absorb the grief and suffering of an entire room while maintaining Coffey's calm and gentle demeanor. One of the most unforgettable examples is the moment Coffee heals Paul Edgecombe's infection. Duncan's tears had to show the weight of carrying another person's pain while simultaneously conveying his own quiet anguish at the cruelty of the world. Frank Darabont often encouraged him to draw on personal memories and emotions, guiding him to connect deeply with Coffee's empathy and innocence. On set, this process was both emotionally and physically draining. Duncan would sometimes cry for multiple takes in a row, each time needing to remain entirely in character. Crew members remember him emerging from the takes, trembling slightly as if he had truly carried the pain of the prisoners and the guards alike. The Green Mile was transformed from a tale of justice to a meditation on compassion, human suffering, and moral responsibility thanks to Duncan's ability to cry on cue. Duncan's emotional reality made it impossible for the audience to deny the sadness, sorrow, and miracle that were taking place. He carried the film's moral and supernatural elements simultaneously, demonstrating that a single human can be both strong and vulnerable. John Coffey was a man who was both deeply empathetic and saddened by the suffering of others. And those tears were more than just an act. What can you say about the movie? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more engaging content. We look forward to seeing you in our next video. Bye for now.